Hi, Punam.
Hello, hi.
How you doing?
I'm all right, thank you. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks so much for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you for having me on. It's an honor.
No worries, and congratulations. You have just had a baby, right?
Yes, I have just had a baby
When was that?
2 weeks ago, just over two
Well,
weeks
what
ago.
what was that? A boy or a girl?
It was a little girl called Elora.
Beautiful. Is it your first?
Yeah. No, this is my second. I've got a boy who's nearly 7. So,
Okay.
um, yeah, seem to have forgotten a lot of what's involved with a newborn. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. What was it like going into a hospital in the midst of all of this to have a baby? On the one hand, you got something. I mean, still, and I say this as a man, terrifying anyway, kind of having a baby, but then surrounded by an environment which must be quite unusual at the moment.
Absolutely. I think it was in the run up to certainly having the baby. I mean, I was working until 3 weeks before I had my baby. And at that point, things were just escalating in
Yeah,
the UK in terms of coronavirus. And I think that the real first kind of realization of how close it came to home was when I was actually finished examining a patient and then discovered that they'd actually been traveling to some of the high risk countries and were having symptoms of coronavirus. And it's interesting that
yeah,
you mentioned there about healthcare professionals and what we feel about our lives being put at risk.
yeah,
But suddenly there I was without any PPE. But
yeah.
it
Wow.
really suddenly dawned on me that there was a risk to my baby. And at that point, we didn't really know much about what impact it could have on the mother and the
Yeah,
child. And then really following on from that, I mean, I'll put it in context in that 6 years ago, I don't do pregnancy and birth very well, apparently, because 6 years ago when I had my son, I experienced severe birth trauma where I ended up in
right.
intensive care, and I ended up with
Wow.
multi-organ failure and ended up in intensive care unconscious for a week. Now, that was pretty bad. I mean, that was horrific. And I kind of relived a lot of that at the early stages of this pregnancy.
Yeah,
But in context, the anxiety that I felt in the run up to having my baby this time, I actually found myself saying I would have gone through the experience 6 years ago anytime over the
yeah.
anxiety that this uncertainty of coronavirus
Right.
and the pandemic is bringing. So, really, in terms of where my mind was at, is that one, I'm a medic. So,
Yeah,
obviously, in terms of keeping up to date with everything that's happening, you can't switch off. I'm
yeah.
married to a frontline doctor also who was still
Oh,
going out to
wow.
work. So we had that dimension of social distancing, living at home, but really living apart. And then I had the anxiety that every pregnant woman, particularly out there, is going through, which is how is this going to work out for me?
Yeah,
But yeah, but actually, the process of going into the hospital, it did a complete U-turn for me in that the anxiety that I felt beforehand, but the serenity that I actually felt whilst in the hospital in a very enclosed, safe space, with the
yeah.
way that the healthcare team actually came together and the provisions that they had in place. Actually, I had the most beautiful birth that I could ever imagine, given the
Amazing.
horrific circumstances that we're under. So it's been a strange one.
Yeah, I bet. Well, there's people here kind of saying what a rock star, what a superstar. I couldn't agree more. I mean, that is, I think it would be terrifying. I spoke to I have a really good friend who works in a maternity ward here, and for a while they were all working, the same without any. They ran out of protective clothing eventually, and they'd lost someone, they'd lost a patient, a mother on the ward, and I, some of the stories coming out were just horrifying. And so it must be so. I remember going in. She actually delivered our two kids as well, and I remember her joking to me, kind of when we were there, that most of the people that pass out in the rooms, in the delivery rooms, it's not the mothers, it's the fathers, and that they're normally having to be sort of carried out of the rooms. And normally although there's a lot of nervousness in those places, there's also a sense of kind of joy and anticipation and excitement and everything else kind of mixed in with it. And she was just saying how that element of it had just disappeared and people wanted to get in there and get out as quickly
Yeah.
as possible.
Definitely. I certainly had that. I just wanted to get in and get out. And I think
Yeah,
I surprised myself because I had so much anxiety from before. But also we had the added element, I don't know if it's like this over in the States, but certainly here, partners are now restricted for the
Yeah, I
time that
heard
they
that.
can
Yeah,
spend in the hospital too. So
yeah,
I kind of find myself alone for a lot of it. But whilst I expected it to be horrific, I think that how it turned out to be in the end, it was a very empowering journey, because you felt
amazing.
that once you were there, the staff picked up and they really were just like that second family, because you had
Yeah,
nobody else with you for a lot of it.
yeah,
And in some way, all as mums that were isolated in our rooms, there was this kind of sense of connection, because I wrote about
yeah,
this in a wee piece recently, that when I looked out of my window, because it was several hours. I had a planned section because I was a high risk pregnancy, and just kind of having that sense of anxiety. And I looked out the window and I could just see three other mums that were waiting their turns, but on their own also. And it was this
wow.
real element, it was this real profound moment, where just through just looking at each other, we could all just say, we're in this, we're really in this together, and we're all going to be
Yeah,
fine. And afterwards in the postnatal ward, I kind of reflected that if only every day that we were reminded of the daily death toll, that we were reminded of how many babies are coming into the world. I mean, how
right.
hopeful would that situation look? Because it was for the
Yeah,
first time in this entire pandemic period that I've had working and in my journey as in pregnancy, that I felt hope.
yes,
And that element had been missing until that point. So
yeah.
I can report that it was positive in what has been a very disturbing um, time for all of us.
Yeah. Did you have to do anything, and more generally, actually, beyond this sort of just this situation? Do you find a way intentionally to sort of look after your mind, and when things feel like they are getting out of control? There's a bunch of your colleagues on here as well. I don't know if they know you, but from the NHS, people just saying that they make a real point of taking time out for themselves to ensure they can show up in the right way, sort of for their patients and everything else. And people saying, well, that's their job, is to make the patient feel safe.
Yeah.
Do you have ways yourself? I don't mean meditation necessarily, but ways that you kind of help sort of calm and clear your mind.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely feel that grounding myself every day is one of the most basic things that I can do. So, I always try. At the moment, in these last 2 weeks, I haven't been able to, because sleep is a massive issue with a newborn. But again,
I remember. I remember.
but getting myself early up just before my son gets up, and just taking some time out to meditate and do some
Yeah.
breathing exercises. But even throughout the day, especially in clinic where you could be seeing up to 30, 40 plus patients a day, just taking out every sort of few patients 5, 10 minutes just to ground yourself, and doing some
Yeah.
deep breathing is really helpful. For me, another thing is just being present. And the way I do that, the way that I found as a mum now I can do that, is being able to spend time with my son or my dog. I feel that the two of
Yeah.
them and a walk outside for some fresh air
Yeah.
helps significantly.
Yeah.
That's what I tend to do, because the days can get overwhelming in and out of this particular period that we're going through. But over the
Yeah.
last few weeks, certainly that has been something that's been the best medicine, really.
I bet. I bet. And you're a GP, right?
Yes,
In Scotland.
yeah.
I'd love to ask you about, like, what the implications of all of this is likely to be in terms of health down the road, and what you anticipate kind of seeing kind of coming into your surgery. But on any given day, and I know it's not black and white, because it's not like physical health and mental health are two separate things. So often they're intertwined and everything else. But percentage wise, of people coming in to see you, like, how many do you think are struggling with their mental health? So it's something, obviously, Headspace should follow a lot. Kind of mental health has become an epidemic really around the world. There's not enough resources for it in most countries. Yeah, what sort of percentage of people are struggling kind of with their mind in some way? Do you have
Yeah,
a
I would
sense?
say, I mean, on a typical day, I will be seeing 30 patients minimum face to face. And out
Yeah,
of that, I would say about 60 to 70% of those
yeah,
cases will have an element of mental health to it. I'm a
yeah.
huge advocate of prevention is better than cure, and I also practice lifestyle medicine. So
Okay.
one of the biggest things that I look for is not just wanting to prescribe a pill to every patient. So it's always
Yeah,
trying to explore deeper as to what is the root cause of the problem that the patient's coming in with. And 9 times out of 10, there is an element where their mental health is suffering because of a circumstance or a situation in their life, or whether it's a concern about their physical health or emotional well-being, and
Yeah.
really trying to kind of suss that out and help them with that is where we find the solution. But certainly mental health is rife, and over the last few weeks particularly, it's deteriorated in people that had pre-existing problems, but also people that have never ever had any problems with their mental health before. They're really struggling.
Yeah, and presumably the burden down the line. I mean, you guys must already be anticipating a huge problem off the back of it. Not just people who have either been unwell themselves or who have lost people who've been unwell, but also people who, for all kinds of different reasons, might be suffering from depression or higher rates of anxiety.
Yeah.
Is it too early to even think about sort of how, as a national body, you can start to cater and service that many people?
Yeah, I mean, the conversations are definitely happening. We are encouraging people to seek help, to speak up,
Yeah,
even from children. I mean, this is such an unusual time. We're
yeah,
not used to be spending a huge volumes of time with in confined spaces for some
yeah,
people,
yeah,
with our families or not with our families, and we're finding ourselves quite alone. Some people have lost their jobs, their
yeah,
livelihoods have disappeared. So there's those that are pregnant, there's those that have become new mums that are finding themselves quite overwhelmed. So there's just so many different situations and stories going around from humans, everyday humans, that right now I think as a body what we can do is keep on getting the message out that do not bottle it up, to seek
yeah,
out and get the support. We're in a very digital era, which is a blessing, because if we didn't have this connection, at least at the moment, things would be a lot worse. But I
yeah,
do worry here in the NHS we're seeing a significant decline in people presenting to the doctors with any
yeah,
regular health problems, but particularly they're not speaking about mental health. Now, a really close colleague was telling me that they had a patient who attended and was so apologetic. They'd left it for a couple of weeks, but they were at the point of feeling suicidal. But they were so worried that they were putting a burden on the doctor or a burden on the health service. And it's really those people we want to speak to and say that absolutely everything about your health and well-being is important to us.
yeah,
Coronavirus is just one thing. We're going to get over this, but actually
yeah,
the aftermath of that is how we take care of you. And deteriorating mental health is one of my biggest worries for my patients and the general
yeah. I bet.
public.
I bet you mentioned your son.
Yeah,
How I'm intrigued. So you're a doctor.
yeah,
Your husband's a doctor. He's on the front line right now, kind of dealing directly, presumably, with patients
yeah.
of corona. How does your house function and work with everybody trying to stay, like, can you do you have to social distance as a family? Like, what
Yeah.
kind of contact can you have with one another to make sure that you all stay sort of
Yeah.
healthy and well?
It's been really difficult. So in the run up to having our baby, um, we decided that it was just too much of a risk for like my husband to kind of be anywhere
Yeah,
near me, my son. We didn't know the implications. So we have essentially probably for about 6 weeks, 7 weeks maybe now,
yeah,
we're fortunate we've got the space, but
yeah,
living on essentially different rooms.
yeah,
We had a really heartbreaking situation a couple of weeks ago, because my husband, who when he comes in, my son will just run up to him and want a big cuddle. And just out of sheer frustration, my husband was like, how many times have I told you to just not come near me? And then that night, my little boy was just devastated, and he asked the question, does daddy not love me anymore? And it's hard to say that without tearing up, because it has been.
I'll do it for you
It's,
instead, okay? I'll do the tearing
don't
up.
you
You
get me
keep
started.
talking.
My hormones are terrible.
Yeah.
um, but like my husband hasn't even cuddled our baby yet.
Oh,
So it's, and even during the birth as well, like he was in for the actual just birthing part. And I guess we keep trying to hold on to the positives, which is, oh, this is part of history. You know, we'll have all this to tell our daughter when she's older. But I think that lack of, we're a very touchy feely family anyway,
yeah,
and just having to like he'll sit at the other end of the table or sit in the kitchen while we're in the dining room, and just nothing feels the way it should be feeling. And I just hope that long term we're very open with our son. We've always been we're a very so we're a family that loves to explore feelings, and we practice gratitude every day. But I just hope that in some way that all of this will still have my son come out of this with his mental health intact, because I do worry about children at the moment and how they're feeling, and it's not natural, this situation.
Well, thankfully, I think I don't know, my own experience as I look back in life is that kids are remarkably resilient. As I look at my own children, I hope that they're very resilient. And I don't think any child could ask for more than to grow up with, people like yourself and your husband who are looking after others. I think that's an incredibly inspirational kind of thing for them. As difficult as it might be right now, I'm sure it'll be very inspiring for them sort of down the line.
No, I hope so.
No, I'm sure.
I think you've just got to. Yeah, I think it's just he does get it. Like we always tell him, this is our duty, and we have to do. I mean, this is part of our jobs, and he does get it. He's only 6, but he does get it, and he does go. But I never want to be a doctor when I'm older, and I'm like, good on you, son.
I can imagine. Well, look, Punam, we've been every day. We've been getting together. There's people here from lots of different countries around the world. Just as a reminder of all the brilliant things that are going on out there, and the work that you guys are doing. But also as just a reminder for ourselves to the importance of taking a bit of time out of the day. Obviously, for your colleagues who are on here, I always forget to remind everyone who's tuning in, for colleagues of yourself in the NHS, anyone working in the public health system either here in the US or there in the UK with the NHS, Headspace is free to use, so plenty of opportunity to try out meditation there. If you're tuning in, you're an educator or you have friends who are educators in the US, it's free for you guys too. And then if you're neither of those, but you still want to try meditation, then we've got the Weathering the Storm collection in the app. It's free, again, it's free to use. But if you don't mind joining us, I thought we could just do like a couple of minutes together we'll just do a simple exercise. It's something that there's one particular exercise, and for those of you who tune in tomorrow for the YouTube live meditation at midday, we're going to do different exercises every week. So we'll go through kind of 8 or 10 different exercises over the week, so you'll get a chance to find out what works best for you. But one that's come up a bunch of times during this particular situation is, how do we, on the one hand, sort of ground our own mind and stay calm and sane ourselves, whilst at the same time feeling connected to those around us. So we've been doing an exercise called loving kindness, which I don't know if you're familiar with it, but we'll do like a mini version of loving kindness. Just as much love, but a little less time.
Oh, I love it. Yes.
Okay, let's do that. So for those of you at home, make yourself comfortable. As always, you can do this lying down, sitting down, whatever feels most comfortable. And if you want to keep your eyes open, you're welcome to, but you're equally welcome to close them. So we're going to start in the usual way, so eyes open, just taking in the space around you in the room. Nice soft focus, and whenever you feel ready, just taking a big deep breath, breathing in through the nose. And as you breathe out through the mouth this time, just gently closing the eyes if you'd like to, and just feeling the weight of the body press down. It's as though you're just letting go of any stress in the body, allowing the body to sink down, and feeling that contact against the seat or the floor beneath you. And just take a moment, as we do every day, just check in with the body. Notice how you actually feel. So often we're too caught up in our thoughts to really notice. So does the body feel heavy? Does it feel light? Is there a feeling of stillness or restlessness in the body? And as always, just starting to become more aware of the breath. Not trying to change the rhythm in any way, but just noticing if each breath is long or short, deep or shallow. So our breath is going to be our anchor for this exercise. So if ever you find your mind wandering off, you can just let go of that thinking and come back to the breath. But just for 10 breaths, I'd like you to picture someone you care about, someone you'd like to see happy, healthy, relaxed, at ease. And I'd like you to picture them somewhere you know that they really enjoy. Might be their favorite place, might be their favorite chair, doesn't matter. So we're still aware of the breathing, but we're picturing that other person. And with every out breath, I'd like you to imagine that person looking just a little bit happier, a little bit more relaxed, and a little more at ease. So maybe you start to see a smile on their face, maybe their shoulders dropping a little bit, your body looking more relaxed. And just taking pleasure in each out breath, seeing that person looking increasingly happy, increasingly at ease. And then just letting go of that image, allowing that feeling, that connection to remain, but just coming back to the breath. Coming back to that feeling of weight and contact against the seat, the floor beneath you. And whenever you feel ready, just gently opening the eyes again. Welcome back. Punam, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. Congratulations again. I'm sure you hear it from everyone at the moment, but at the risk of sounding boring, thank you so much to you, your husband, all of your colleagues, and everyone that's risking themselves to keep the rest of us safe. And I hope that very soon you all get together as a family and are able to sort of truly enjoy and celebrate the new arrival, you know.
Thank you so much for that. That was so lovely.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. And thanks to all of you for tuning in today. Thanks for joining. As always, if you want a longer meditation, go and check out the app, or join us tomorrow for our YouTube meditation, 12 o'clock Pacific time. I will look forward to seeing, and I'll see you back here tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. for day 10. All right, thanks, Punam.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Take care.